is the question whether Mr. Zuma's private prosecution should be adjourned or removed or struck from the roll.
In your election news headlines this hour, the High Court in Pietermaritzburg has struck off the roll the former President Jacob Zuma's case to privately prosecute advocate Billy Downer and journalist Karen Moore.
I rise. We rise. I rise. We rise. We rise. Together. Together. We rise.
Also, Rise Mzansi says restoring trust in police is imperative. This is to create safer communities in South Africa. The party is currently out campaigning in the Western Cape. The Electoral Court has dismissed 5 cases brought against the Independent Electoral Commission, finding that the arguments submitted by the parties were not sustainable. Now, can South Africa afford illegal immigrants? And what is their impact on the economy and service delivery? Umbuzo wethu ke lo namuhla mbukeli as we head to the polls. Sinibingelele sinamkele kanti ke uhlelo lakho ke leli Elections 360 daily kama lami ngumxolisi wakwaMasango. Now kulo hlelo we will be traveling across Mzansi Africa, giving you a voice and allowing you to share your election related stories from water, electricity, crime, voting, education kanye nokunye futhi. Ohlelweni ke namhlanje we will look at one of the most talked about issues this election season, which is border management and immigration. Our coverage will include all regions of the country njalo ngomsombuluko kuze kube ngolosine ngo5 ukuya ku5:30 p.m. khona la kunqaphambili SABC 1 Mzansi for sure ku DTT as well as all of our digital platforms. Khumbula kungaba ingxenye yale nkulumo namhlanje ngokushayela ucingo ku 011 714 0726 noma 0727 okanye 0728 or hit us up on our social media platforms. Our X handle is SABC Izindaba on X as well as on Facebook, the same as SABC Izindaba. Shayele usibhalele ngofisa okusazisa khona ngesifundazwe sakho. Mhlambe ke wenze njalo ke ngokusebenzisa i-hashtag yethu ku Elections 360 daily. This makes it easy for us to pick up all your interaction right here on the show. Kanti ke Elections 360 daily iqala njengamanje. But first of all, a warm welcome to my guests that will be helping me navigate le nkulumo namhlanje. We're joined by Ashraf Esop, who's an immigration attorney. Also via our video link is Frank Blackmore, who's the lead economist at KPMG. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. It's great to have you. I'm looking forward to our engagement this afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Good evening.
All right, let's start here. So, Gutiwage, with the general election scheduled for the 29th of May, immigration has become a highly charged political issue. The South African authorities say they are tightening border security in Mzansi Africa. On the show, namhlanje, we bring you the report which aired on our sister show, the Elections 360 Weekly, on porous borders and migration impact in the Limpopo province. Let's take a look.
Munya Filmon. I'm a chairperson of Madinbe Business Forum Against Crime. Jazunendo kwamba de muramboni wa Limpopo isi auna madi udry. Madi ato drova somewhere. So eju murambo sina madi. Do une watu wa outside. Wada washumisa uno ni murambe se natural border. Bachikobona eitaba ngamra wayo ndi Zimbabwe. So even if waima palan uyakonopha bathu ba Zimbabwe bakhwamba bangahange ndi murambo uyu une bathu basedi batobva ngei badze bajena simple. Chamba zona guru idzifuka ngene pakane bad dzifuka ngane. So auna masort. So like I said, already rarko denga guru roto icha. We'll go simple. Bandu une bathu basedi bachibvanga mirenje nangadzigariki vadava kuvangana hapa ndi ringi yavo kana ndi bus stop yavo vachida panoni guru idzidza vahwara panoni dzai. You can see uri ndifetune vatodito dzura vaita whatever zvino vakuita le ringini yavo. Problem eravesa nayo ndiya livestock. If you check this cows vakonozvitsva vha ḓa vha zwi shumisa South Africa, maybe during funerals or during stockfels or during party times. Na zwine vha zwi tswa dzimbudzi hange vha tshi tswa dzimbudzi vha ḓi pfuka nga simple.
Kanti-ke Mbugeli, we further this discussion with ivakashi zethu zanamhlanje, Frank Blackmore, who is the lead economist at KPMG, as well as Ashraf Esop, who is an immigration attorney. Perhaps let's start with you, Mr. Blackmore. We've seen the impact of porous borders and, of course, illegal migration from the scene setter. If you can just paint a picture for us, just how bad this is on the economy.
Well, there are different ways to see migration. So I'm going to take you back to how migration theoretically could work. And theoretically, migration is just movement of individuals across borders, usually for employment reasons. And they do this because either they're push factors, such as wars or bad policies in their home countries, or they are pull factors. There are more opportunities in the countries they're moving to. Okay, so people are looking for those better opportunities and crossing borders because of this. One thing that is important to note is immigration is an emotive issue, and it can have profound social, economic, and political impacts, of course. But to say it's purely harmful is probably incorrect. I think this is a very asymmetric issue where if good things happen because of migration, nobody really is aware of those type of things taking place because nobody's shouting out, nobody's pointing these issues out. And that is often the case for migration. So the emphasis is often put on the negative side of migration where, as we've said in the clip you've just played, it results in crime and other de facto issues. So this is a very complex issue, but has both positives and negatives, and we must remember those positives still exist, even if they're not as obvious to us in everyday life.
And Mr. Esop, of course, Mr. Blackmore bringing in some of those push and pull factors. Would there be some sort of a way to come to a consensus, perhaps to try and bridge the gap, to have those push and pull factors bring us to a place where everyone is happy? Would that even be possible?
Yes, I think it would be possible, and it has proven to be possible. Remember that South Africa was found by the Dutch East India Company because they wanted economic opportunities. They wanted a fresh station in the Cape. That's how they discovered us. And then they pushed out the population that was natives there, the Khoisan people. This was taken over by the British East India Company. Subsequently, South Africa became a union. And you remember when we discovered gold, Paul Kruger, the president at that time, understood that there will be many pull factors. And he passed a thing called the Uitlanders Act. And he wanted to keep the foreigners out of the gold industry. And of course, we have the Immigrations Act of 1911, where, again, the British had indicated that there will be some kind of spatial apartheid because the resources had to be reached by those that were in favor. So, of course, South Africa is a great magnet for opportunity. It was the most developed economy in the African continent, and people from all over the continent prior to our constitutional democracy in 1994 and post were always attracted to South Africa. It's a known fact that our mining industry was based on the back of migrants.
And Mr. Blackmore, to bring it back into the fold, I think having engaged with many South Africans throughout the course of this election season, the sense on the ground, most of them will come and tell you that they're already grappling and jostling for limited resources. So this is clearly a problem for most of them. What would your reaction to such statements be?
Remember, so this is the lived reality for a lot of South Africans, but that's only one side of the story. On the other side of the story are a lot of the skilled migrants that come into the country, that create businesses or jobs, that employ South Africans, that give people the opportunity to put food on their table. And again, as I mentioned in my opening statement, these types of examples of migration are not often are not often brought to light in the debate, especially around election season. It's always we're focusing on the other side, where the lived experience is often on the negative aspects of migration. So I think the question probably is not for or against migration. It's, as in everything else in our economy, we need to manage migration properly. And we know that although we have a lot of sort of rules and regulations that guide these things, it's the enforcement of these and the way they are carried out that create either a net benefit or a net cost to society at the end of the day for something like migration. But always remember there are two different types of migration. And I'm sure my colleague on the interview will take you back to that, especially under apartheid. There was basically a two-tiered system. You could come through the front door into South Africa. In other words, if you were skilled labor from somewhere, you would get your permit, etc., and be able to work here. Or you could come through the back door, illegally, so to speak, and try and find work in the mines or in agriculture or whatever it is. And unfortunately, this system still prevails today, where a lot of the skills come through the application process for permits, work permits, permanent residency, etc. But a lot of the sort of lower skilled people that are migrating to South Africa have no option but to come through the back routes. And so we still have this system, even though we only have theoretically one immigration sort of system on the table. And I think therein lies the problem. It's how we're enforcing this migration policy of ours where the problems occur.
Okay, let's park it there for now to take a quick break. Because I also want us to delve into the issue of the draft white paper. But we do all this and more. Must be a careful. Elections 360 Daily. Siyabuya. Sakhezinathi Konalagu Elections 360 Daily. And of course, we continue our discussion on elections, border control and immigration with our guests. Goroge, let's hear what the electorate had to say about these issues.
I feel like everyone is allowed to come to whichever country they feel like. But I feel like now everyone is coming in and there's no laws to say that, okay, if you come in, you need to come with a visa, what type of visa, work visa, school visa. Anyone comes in, everyone is getting an ID legally or illegally. So I feel like there's not enough strong laws to implement for the foreigners or someone who's visiting in the country.
The first question they will ask you is, how much do I get paid? But if you employ someone from outside, they're going to work because they need the job. Yeah. At the end of the day, we are also gaining something because we're getting an employee.
I'm not from here, so I'm from the USA. Yeah. So I don't know too much about South Africa, but I know there's a lot of, like, I've been staying in other countries in Africa as well, and I know there's a lot of like Malawians here and Zimbabweans and some Tanzanians.
So the recent migration laws after 2015, it is helping the economy, where we are not bringing any unskilled or low-skilled resources from outside. It's only the critical skilled people who are migrating. So in that way, it is helping in transferring the knowledge as well, where we can uplift the society.
There's too many immigrants in South Africa. And I think we need to give opportunities to the South Africans, to the job opportunities, and to grow the country and the youth as well, to skill them up.
Yeah. I was actually staying in Tanzania before, and I know like there's a lot of exporting from this country that direction, and so like working together with other African countries I think is beneficial, obviously.
Again, Mbugeli, mibono yako ke leo on the immigration and on migration, and as well as its effects on the economy. Tike sizwe ke ukuthi nina ngabe nitheni enkundleni zethu zokuxhumana namhlanje. Siqala ngo-Inosa ino uthi our cities agcwele ngokweqile, that causes a burden to the municipalities ngoba some of them don't pay for electricity and water. Kanti nemisebenzi ayikho, that affects the economy a lot. I think this is also a point that we spoke to a bit earlier on in the program. Sibajazwa Hopewell sithi sona umnotho uyehla ngoba basebenza imali kuleli abayikhokhi intela bahambe nayo bese baye nayo emazweni abo futhi ke babangisana nathi imisebenzi nezinsiza kusebenza zakuleli. Let's take the next one. Tobani uthi ke ukuthuthikela kwabantu ukuthukuthela kwabantu kuleli kwenza uhulumeni angakhoni ukumisa i-service delivery eyanele ebantwini ngoba kukhishwa imali kwi-budget kodwa ke utholakalisa ukuthi abantu abasayizitholi ke ama-service wabo ke kuthiwa ke nokufuduka kwabantu kwesinye isikhathi might also have an impact. Xoli yena uthi uyawa kalokhu umnotho welizwe ngenxa yabantu bokufika and of course kwesinye isikhathi kuthiwa ke ama-resources ayabangwa ngaso sonke isikhathi. And I think we also move with this conversation, Mr. Isop, in a time where we get on social media where people sharing frustrations. Some of them are warranted, and I think it's time for us to now delve into that white paper that promises to be the answer or solution to the problem that we're facing right now. But when we're looking at the corruption that has been reported about in the Home Affairs Department, is this really going to work?
So that's a very important question, because what we've seen thus far is a lack of scientific evidence about whether immigrants create problems or create jobs, contribute to the economy. Are they overwhelming the housing system or education or health? So on a scientific level, it's very difficult to find studies that can point that out. In fact, the contrary is proved. There was a study in 2018 by the OECD and a subsequent report by the parliamentary monitoring group in 2019. Surprisingly, they both found that the impact of foreigners on the economy is positive. They create jobs, they pay tax, they create a lot of downstreaming opportunities as well. In fact, the SSMMEs in Swane were told to be only 5% of that business population appointed migrants. Now, on the other side, you have the anecdotal evidence, right, that you see daily. Border crossings, you're seeing opportunistic asylum applications because those, I mean, there's a recognized study that, or not a recognized study, but there is a perception that there are more economic migrants that are using the asylum-seeking system than opportunities that exist in terms of the Immigrations Act, which is what you're referring to. So the white paper and the recent regulations that were withdrawn last week try to address the opportunities in legal migration. By that, you're looking at the remote work visa, you're looking at the trusted employment scheme, and of course now the e-visa. That having been said, the question is, does the department have the capacity to produce the results that employers are looking for? We've heard there's 40,000 spousal applications backlogged because the minister says he doesn't have the capacity to verify the spousal application. Of course, now he says when it comes to business visas, there's a quick turnaround, which is encouraging. But now work visas, in terms of the regulations, is going to move to a points-based system, which is some of the international destinations use all of this. So there's a learning curve. But the Immigrations Act itself makes provision in its preamble for the services of foreigners, their investment and their skills.
And Mr. Blackmore, what's your take on that? Do you share the same sentiments?
Well, I think I do. And I think, like any new policy, as Mr. Isop has stated, it will only be in its implementation we will find both the pitfalls and the successes within the policy. But just reading it at face value, there are a lot of good things. If we look at what the European Union did and allows sort of labour to move between the countries of Europe and work anywhere, a similar thing is starting to be envisioned for the SADC region in the new white paper. And that basically looks at a pro sort of African structure specific in the SADC region, and that would be great, because if you're a skilled person, you should be able to move across borders to where you can be most valuable, so to speak. But there are also obviously some negatives that have been pointed out, including the handling of asylum seekers, or refugees with respect to the fact that they're not allowed free movement, they're not allowed to work.
And I think I'd also be keen on finding out just a bit later on, before we wrap this conversation up, if getting this policy right will help us recover the economy as well as we continue to navigate this conversation. Sibamba la kwamanje mbukeli sawuthengisa. Hlala nathi khona la ku-Elections 360 Daily. Sahleli nathi khona la ku-Elections 360 Daily. Sesifike esigabeni sokugcina-ke sohlelo mbukeli as we continue to explore some solutions njengoba sesifike emaphethelweni enkulumo yethu. And Mr. Blackmore, just to bring you back into the fold, you know, could getting the policies that we spoke about a bit earlier on with South Africa's actually assist us as a country with economic recovery and also increase things such as prosperity and heightened security for citizens and migrants alike? What's your take?
Of course. I think you're correct in what you've said there. And if we control the system to get more of the people we want, more of the people that buy into building the economy and society in South Africa, we can only be better off. Of course, it requires the proper management of the system. But if that is the case, every country in the world, whether they're developing, has a migration policy. The most successful ones make it work in their favor, and we can too.
All right, and Mr. Esop, let's get your parting shot as well, and let's explore some solutions as we conclude this conversation.
So in respect of an own business visa, for example, the Twin Peaks demanded by the Department of Trade and Industry is not just that you have the capital of 5 million rand to invest. Indeed, if you invest in certain categories of businesses, you could even ask for a waiver, such as tourism, mining, agriculture, etc., etc. Now, what they demand is the Twin Peaks of job creations and skills transfer. So you could see there's a very, very specific focus. Let's turn to the critical skills. South Africa has got a finite list of 140 critical skills that are desperately needed in this country. Everything from engineers to nurses, and the threshold is quite high, including for teachers and lecturers. You know, some of them you have to have a PhD level entry. Now, all of these efforts are in order to address the skill shortage and create jobs and allow the economy to grow. That's one part of it. But there is a criticism against the department by many, many employers that they stymied the growth because of inaction.
Listen, gentlemen, I have to thank you so much for joining us on the program today, and thank you so much for your insights. We have sadly come to the end of uhlelo lwanamhlanje, kodwa we're back again now kusasa to look at strategies to alcohol and drug abuse kanye ne-impact in our communities. Sibonge Mbukeli ukuthi ube nathi namhlanje, and a big thank you to our guests, Frank Blackmore, lead economist at KPMG, as well as Ashraf Esop, who's an attorney for immigration. From myself, Umxolisi Wagwamasango, kanye nethimba le Elections 360 Daily. Nisale kahle.